Well, as a mother of two young boys, I think a lot about how to raise them in a society where boys and men are falling behind in several different areas, according to the data, like in education, the workforce, and social settings. And that led me to want to further explore the why behind it. So this week, we're rolling out a series with social scientist Richard Reeves, and he has studied these trends extensively as the founding president of the American Institute for Boys and Men. And he's also the author of Boys and Men, Why the Modern Male is Struggling, Why It Matters, and what to do about it. So I want to begin with the foundational years of shaping boys in the classroom, starting with kindergarten. This summer, Washington, D.C. joined a group of major school districts across the country banning the practice of redshirting, where families delay kindergarten a year to give their child more time to develop emotionally or academically. New York City, Chicago, and Oklahoma public schools have all passed similar bans or restrictions on that practice, arguing it benefits wealthy families and that students should be with kids their own age. Other states support redshirting, with Tennessee finding that redshirted students perform better later on in third grade literacy tests than their peers. Reeves explains why he's concerned about this growing trend of banning redshirting and why parents should strongly consider holding back their boys in kindergarten. What are your big issues with education and men and boys?
The education system has become less boy-friendly over the last few decades. There's a few reasons for that. One is a huge decline in the share of male teachers. And I think that inevitably has an effect on the culture and ethos of the school. And we do know that when it comes to behavioral issues, etc., that having some men around helps. Because whether we like it or not, there are differences in the way that we behave. And so having male teachers around just really helps us not to immediately pathologize the way in which boys are acting. I think one of the problems is that we have this view about how a student should be. So sit still for a certain period of time, focus on abstract work, have a certain level of emotional maturity. And probably that student we've got in mind is a girl. And if boys aren't like that, we treat them like malfunctioning girls. Sort of defective female students in a way. And so they get overdiagnosed with ADD, etc. Or sometimes behavior just gets treated as requiring, suspension or whatever. And so it's a good reminder that these things are all on the average. The average 5-year-old girl is older than the average 5-year-old boy. And the average 15-year-old girl is definitely older than the average 15-year-old boy, as every parent will tell you, and as every teacher will tell you. Girls hit puberty earlier, their brains develop earlier, they become adult or more adult earlier than boys do. And that really translates into academic outcomes, because then they do their homework, they do turn up on time, they've got their act together a little bit earlier than boys, and so that's why you see some of these huge education gaps that we couldn't see before.
So then if you think based on the data, that the 5-year-old girl is more ahead than the 5-year-old boy, should 5-year-old boys be held back and redshirted for kindergarten?
I think they should, or at least they should have that option. I think that the fact that boys are known to be developmentally a little bit less mature than girls. So in terms of school readiness at around the age of 5, the gender gap is bigger than almost any other gap you can find, class, race, etc. And so what you're seeing is just everyone knows this, is just that boys are just a little bit less likely to be ready. So why not give them more time? Give them an extra year of pre-K, give them a few months more of pre-K, so that then you would actually be leveling the field. I think at the very least that should be an option that's available to parents.
It's not always an option like in D.C. where we are.
Right, in D.C. they just banned this, following the lead of some other cities. And the reason they did that was because they saw more affluent parents doing it. So more affluent parents were actually holding their boys back, especially to give them more chance in the school system, right? To give them more chance to succeed academically. The irony here is actually it's the lower income boys who would benefit more from a bit of extra time. And so the challenge here is that what the DC school board and others see is like a class gap. So they see affluent parents doing it, but not lower income parents doing it.
What's your advice to parents through this journey of putting their boys through school and trying to get them ready for the world?
Well, the key thing is that there's much more variation between individual kids of all genders and races than there is you can't just have one rule. There is no one size fits all rule here. But I would say that if you are concerned that your son in particular, this could apply to your daughter too, is just not ready for school, is not ready for kindergarten, and certainly not ready for first grade. Talk to teachers about it. You know, take your own instincts seriously. There's a sort of industrial quality to the education system too often, which is like the conveyor belt starts at this age and we have to put your kids on and then they'll fall off the conveyor belt at the other end, and that's just the way the system is, and the kids are like you know, going onto this conveyor belt like in a factory. It's like, well, maybe they're not ready for the conveyor belt. Like, maybe we could be a little bit more human about this and just ask the question, are they ready and could they benefit from a bit more time, and talk to the teachers about that. So we should definitely take your instincts seriously about that. And the other thing I would say to parents as much as to teachers is that there is a danger, I think, even in the home, where we're holding our boys to a different standard and we're saying to ourselves, and sometimes even to them, why aren't you more like your sister? I used to think about my boys, why aren't you more like your sister? And they didn't have a sister. I made one up. I had an imaginary daughter that I could compare them to, always badly, and she would be able to remember to put both her shoes on before going to school. When I opened her book bag, it wasn't like a controlled explosion of stuff. When she brought chemistry homework home, it wasn't in a ball, right? It was in a file. It was in a folder, right? And so even I, without having a daughter, I think I had this kind of imaginary ideal. And I do think that we all need to show a bit more patience, a bit more grace to our boys if they're struggling in the education system.
Yeah, really interesting hearing his perspective on it, right? As someone who has studied the issue. My kids, actually, they just went back to school today. And
First day of school today.
First day of school today. And teachers are amazing. And, you know, and he said that too. Look, you know, teachers really are, and they should get more credit than they currently receive. At the same time, you know, what he pointed out was interesting about just some of the issues in the education system now with, you know, fewer male teachers, and those male teachers might be able to better understand the boys' behavior and that kind of thing. And his concern was that without that, you over-pathologize with boys and diagnose them with things such as ADD, and some rightly have it, but by doing that, you're pathologizing with typical boy behavior, right? And so it was really interesting, the case he made for holding kids back a year in kindergarten.
I'm really happy that you're doing these special reports for us here in the Situation Room, and I know our viewers are happy as well, and there's more to come.
Yeah, there's more to come, and tomorrow we're going to dive into fatherhood and how important fatherhood is. So, you know, we're going to explore more about this decline of boys and men, and you know, we're really going to dive into, Wolf, you know, what does it mean to be a dad, and the positive effect dads have on boys and girls' lives. He makes it very clear it's not a zero-sum game, right, Wolf? Here's a preview. How important are dads in the life of a boy?
Dads are really important for kind of teenagers and adolescents, girls and boys, but especially boys, getting out into the world, kind of learning how to navigate the world, take some risks. So again, at the risk of stereotyping, but true on the average, dads are a little bit better at encouraging their kids to take risks. Mums are a little bit better at keeping them safe. And so the stereotype here would be throwing your kid in the air, right? You throw your kid in the air and catch them. When dads do that, they get a spike in the hormone oxytocin, which is like the bonding hormone.
And I have been guilty of saying, wait, don't you make sure their head doesn't hit the ceiling. We talk about all of that. Make sure you tune in tomorrow at 11 a.m. for this continuing series.